Hey everyone. So it sounds like you're really trying to get your spoken English to the next level.
Yeah.
And be able to just let it flow, right? Like without having to think so much.
Yes.
To sound more like a native speaker. We actually, we dove into this really cool podcast called The Simple Pod.
Okay.
With these two hosts, Marco and Erica, and they had some really cool tips on how to do just that.
Nice.
They're all about getting you to speak without overthinking, which I think we all struggle with a little bit at least.
Yeah, overthinking it's a killer of fluency for sure.
Totally. So like, why does that even happen? Why do we get so in our heads when we're trying to speak another language?
I think a lot of it comes down to fear, right? Like the fear of making a mistake or sounding silly or just not knowing what to say at all and just freezing up.
Oh yeah, it's like your brain just short circuits and then all of a sudden you can't even remember basic words.
Yeah, and that fear just leads to more overthinking. So then you're like, wait, what's the grammar rule?
Right.
What's the perfect word for this? Oh, there's no perfect word, so I can't say anything.
Yeah, it's the worst.
Right.
So what do Marco and Erica say about like getting out of that headspace? How do you stop overthinking?
So one of the biggest things they emphasize is just like the importance of speaking.
Okay.
And speaking a lot. They were saying that, it's more important to just speak regularly than like studying grammar for hours and hours.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah.
But shouldn't grammar be like the foundation though?
Well, yeah. So think of it this way. Grammar is like the blueprint for a house.
Okay,
it gives
great.
you the structure, right? But speaking is like actually building the house. So like you can have the best blueprint in the world, but if you never pick up a hammer,
Yeah.
you'll never actually have that house to live in.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
right.
So it's more about just getting the reps in and like getting used to using the language.
Yeah,
Even if it's not perfect.
exactly. Yeah. And the more you speak, the more your brain gets used to thinking in English and reacting in English, right?
Yeah.
So then you can kind of bypass all of that overthinking and just start communicating.
Got it. So are they talking about any specific ways to speak? Like, do they have any tips?
Yeah, well, they're really big on just finding any opportunity to speak,
Okay.
even if it means just talking to yourself, which, let's be honest, we all do.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it's a great way to practice because there's no pressure.
Right.
You could just experiment with the language, get those words flowing, try out different phrases, and you're basically training your mouth to make those sounds.
Right.
Without worrying about messing up.
So it's almost like making your everyday life into like a practice zone.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting. Marco and Erica are huge proponents of this idea of switching your internal dialogue to English.
Wait, what does that even mean? Like thinking in English all the time?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Whoa.
So instead of translating everything in your head from your native language,
Yeah.
they suggest trying to think directly in English as much as possible.
I mean, that sounds pretty intense. Is that even realistic if you're still learning?
It takes effort for sure, but they really believe that it's one of the most powerful ways to like internalize the language
Yeah.
and to make it feel less foreign.
Okay, but how do they suggest people do that?
They say just start small.
Yeah.
Marco talked about like narrating your everyday actions in English.
Okay.
So for example, like if you're making coffee,
Yeah.
instead of thinking, I need to make coffee in your native language, you would say it in English. Like, okay, I'm grabbing the coffee filter.
Oh.
Now I'm scooping the coffee grounds. Simple things like that.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's like you're constantly commentating on your life, but in English.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. I could see how that would help.
Yeah, it's kind of like immersive language learning. But instead of going to an English-speaking country,
Right.
you're creating that immersion in your own head.
That's really cool.
Right.
But I feel like that takes a lot of effort.
It does. It does. It's a real change in how you think,
Yeah.
But the idea is the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Okay.
And eventually thinking in English will just become more of a habit.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be really helpful.
Yeah.
So by speaking regularly and thinking in English, you can kind of rewire your brain to bypass all that overthinking
Yeah.
and just communicate more naturally, right?
That's the idea. You're creating the right conditions for your brain to really absorb the language and become more fluent in a more organic way.
Wow, so cool. Okay, so besides like speaking and thinking in English, did Marco and Erica have any other tips on becoming more fluent?
Yeah, they had a lot of great advice. One thing that stood out was their emphasis on using common phrases.
Like everyday expressions, idioms.
Exactly. They really believe that learning and using these prefabricated chunks of language can be super helpful, especially when you're trying to speak fluently.
Yeah, it's almost like you don't have to construct every sentence from scratch. You have these ready-made phrases that you can use.
It's like having a secret weapon against overthinking.
Oh, I love that.
Right. It's like you have this toolbox full of perfectly good sentences ready to go.
Yeah.
And you don't have to think about, did I get the grammar right?
Yeah.
Because they're already done for you.
Totally. Yeah. So what kind of phrases are we talking about?
They had tons of examples like, that sounds great,
Yeah.
or let me think about that, or I'm not sure, but I can find out. Just expressions that you use in everyday conversations.
Yeah. And those are great because they're simple, but you can use them in so many situations.
Exactly, yeah. And the more you use them, the more natural they will sound. It's like learning a dance routine. At first, you have to think about every step, but after a while, it just flows.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Right.
So are these phrases like the building blocks of fluency? Like, do they help you to create more complex sentences?
That's exactly what Marco and Erica were saying.
No.
Yeah, they see these phrases as the foundation.
Okay.
And then as you get comfortable using them, you can start combining them and expanding on them to express more and more complex ideas.
Got it.
It's like building a house brick by brick.
Okay. I think I'm getting it.
Yeah.
So by speaking frequently, thinking in English, and using these common phrases, we can basically skip the overthinking part and just speak more naturally and confidently.
Yeah, that's the essence of their approach. They want to help people break free from the fear and the hesitation that holds them back and unlock their true speaking potential.
It's more about empowering people to express themselves without being perfect.
Exactly. It's a journey. Right.
Totally. I like that a lot. It takes the pressure off. It makes it feel a lot more approachable.
It's about finding the joy in the process and, celebrating the little victories along the way.
I love that. Okay. This has been really insightful so far. What are some other takeaways from Marco and Erica's podcast?
Well, they kept coming back to this idea of letting go of the fear of making mistakes.
Okay.
We touched on it a little, but it's so important that I think it deserves its own attention.
Okay, so we talked about how fear can cause you to overthink.
Yeah.
But how does it actually affect your ability to learn and speak a language?
It's almost like fear creates this invisible barrier between you and the language. And it makes you hesitant to speak, to try new things, to really put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And when you're afraid of making mistakes, you're less likely to take risks, which are so important for learning a language.
Okay, I get it. So it's like fear actually holds you back from reaching your full potential.
Exactly.
So how do they say you can overcome that fear?
Well, they believe that the key is to change how you think about mistakes.
Okay.
Instead of seeing them as failures, you need to start seeing them as opportunities to learn.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Right? Mistakes are going to happen, especially when you're learning something new. That's how we learn and grow.
But how do you actually change your mindset about that?
They have a few suggestions. One is to focus on progress, not perfection.
Okay.
So every time you use a new word successfully or a new phrase, even if it's not perfect, you celebrate that small win.
I like that.
Acknowledge how far you've come.
Right.
Instead of dwelling on the mistakes you make along the way.
It's good, yeah.
And another thing is be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Practice self-compassion. Everyone who learns a new language makes mistakes. It's all part of the process.
Yeah, that's so important because you can be so hard on yourself.
You can.
And that makes the whole learning process feel so much harder.
Exactly. It's like we're always comparing ourselves to native speakers.
Yeah.
Which is unrealistic, right?
Yeah.
So we need to remember that it's a journey.
Yeah.
And it's okay to make mistakes along the way.
This is really freeing. Like you're giving us permission to mess up, to experiment, to just have fun with it.
That's exactly it. Learning a language should be enjoyable, not stressful.
I love that. So by reframing mistakes and being kinder to yourself, you're creating a more positive environment for yourself.
Exactly. You're shifting the focus from fear to curiosity.
Yeah.
And you're embracing the challenges as opportunities to learn.
This has been great. Okay, so we've learned that speaking regularly, thinking in English, using common phrases, embracing those mistakes are all key ingredients in becoming more fluent. What else did they have to say about becoming a more confident English speaker?
So they also talked about the importance of finding your own personal motivation for learning English.
Oh, yeah. Motivation is so important for anything you do in life, right?
Absolutely. And it's especially crucial when it comes to language learning because it can be a long and challenging process.
Totally. So what did Marco and Erica say about finding that motivation? Like, did they have any specific tips?
Yeah, they really emphasized connecting your language learning goals with your personal values and aspirations.
What do you mean by that? Like, can you give me an example?
Sure. So let's say you love to travel.
Okay.
Your motivation for learning English could be to connect with people from different cultures and have more authentic travel experiences.
Right. Or like maybe you're really into a certain field like science or technology and you want to be able to read research papers or attend conferences in English.
Exactly. The key is to find something that truly resonates with you. Something that makes you excited to learn and practice.
I feel like when you're genuinely passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work.
Exactly. It becomes a source of joy and fulfillment.
Totally.
And that positive energy can really fuel your learning journey.
So connecting your language learning goals to your passions can be a super powerful way to stay engaged and motivated.
Absolutely.
Okay. So besides that, did Marco and Erica have any other tips for making the learning process more fun or enjoyable?
Yeah, they talked a lot about finding learning methods that work for you.
Okay.
Because everyone learns differently, right?
Yeah, for sure. What works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. So they really encourage people to experiment and find what clicks for them.
Okay.
Some people might prefer traditional methods like textbooks, while others might thrive in more interactive settings like language exchange groups or online courses.
I like that. It's all about finding what works for you and not being afraid to try new things.
Yeah. It's about personalizing your learning journey and making it your own.
Okay, so we talked about finding your motivation, experimenting with different learning methods, embracing mistakes. Did they give any advice on how to actually structure your practice?
Yeah. They suggested creating a consistent study routine.
Oh, yeah, that's like classic advice for anything you're trying to learn, right?
Right. Consistency is key.
Yeah.
But it's not just about setting aside the time to study. It's also about breaking down your practice into manageable chunks.
That's a good point because it's easy to get overwhelmed if you try to do too much at once.
Exactly.
Right.
So instead of trying to cram everything in, they suggest focusing on one specific area at a time.
Okay.
So, for example, one day you might work on vocabulary. Another day you might practice pronunciation.
Right.
Or work on your listening skills.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I like that.
to take a more focused approach.
More intentional, yeah.
Yeah. And it's also important to be patient with yourself.
Yeah,
You know, language learning takes time and effort.
for sure.
Some days you'll feel like you're making tons of progress. Other days you might feel stuck.
Totally.
It's all part of the process.
Yeah, you got to remember it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. It's about the long game.
Okay.
It's about consistently putting in the work, even when it's challenging, and trusting that you will get there eventually.
I love that. Okay, this has been super helpful. I feel like we've really gotten into the key things for becoming more fluent and confident
Yeah.
speaking English.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
For sure.
But I think the most important takeaway is that fluency isn't some magical ability.
Right.
You know, it's not like some people have it and others don't.
Yeah.
It's a skill that anyone can develop with effort, the right mindset, and a healthy dose of self-compassion.
Yeah, and I think Marco and Erica did a great job of breaking down these complex ideas into steps that anyone can follow.
Yeah, they're really passionate about helping people overcome their language learning challenges and reach their full potential.
So to recap, we've talked about speaking regularly, thinking in English, using common phrases, embracing mistakes,
Yeah.
finding your motivation, experimenting with different learning methods, creating a study routine, and most importantly, being patient with yourself.
That's a lot, but I think if you focus on those areas, you'll be well on your way to reaching your goals.
And remember, the journey itself is important.
It is.
It's not just about the destination.
Embrace the challenges.
Yes.
Celebrate the victories and have fun along the way.
That's great advice. Speaking of the journey, remember that technique Marco suggested about narrating your everyday actions in English?
Oh, yeah. I love that one.
That one really stuck with me. It's such a simple but effective way to immerse yourself
It is.
in the language.
Yeah.
Have you been trying that?
I have, actually. It's been pretty interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of things have you been narrating?
Well, this morning I was making breakfast.
Okay.
And I found myself saying things like, I'm cracking the eggs, I'm stirring the batter, I'm flipping the pancakes.
Wow.
It felt a little silly at first.
Yeah.
But then I started noticing that I was thinking more naturally in English.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's like training your brain to think in a new language.
Yeah.
Even when you're doing like the most mundane things.
Exactly.
And it's not just about the words themselves.
Right.
It's also about the rhythm and intonation. You know, when you're narrating your actions, you're internalizing the subtle nuances of spoken English.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's like you're absorbing the language on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And the best part is it's something you can do anywhere, anytime.
Totally.
You don't need any special materials or equipment, just your own thoughts and your own voice.
So it's like everyone has this built-in language learning tool.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we don't need to overcomplicate things.
I love that.
Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So it's all about finding those moments in your day-to-day life where you can practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Sneak in some extra practice.
It's about making language learning part of your routine.
Right.
Rather than something that you have to like carve out separate time for.
Okay, so if you can incorporate these little habits, like narrating, thinking in English, using those common phrases, you can essentially create an immersive environment, even if you don't live in an English-speaking country.
Exactly. It's about being proactive and creating opportunities.
I love that.
For yourself to really engage with the language.
That's so cool. It puts the power in your hands.
It does. It reminds you that you're in control of your own learning.
Okay, so what can our listener do to create a more immersive environment?
It is.
To create a more immersive environment.
Well, one simple but effective strategy is to just surround yourself with as much English as possible.
Okay, that makes sense. The more you hear and see it, the more natural it becomes, right? But like, how can someone do that if they don't live in an English-speaking country?
Oh, there's so many options these days.
Yeah.
You can watch movies and TV shows in English, listen to music, listen to podcasts,
Okay.
read books and articles. You can even connect with English speakers online.
That's true. I mean, technology has made it so much easier
It has.
to access English content from anywhere in the world.
You can literally create your own little English-speaking bubble.
Oh, I like that.
Right in your own home.
Yeah.
And the more you immerse yourself in that bubble, the easier it will be to think, speak, and even dream in English.
That's so cool. It's like building your own little English ecosystem.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, but it can't just be about like passively consuming content, right?
Right. You need to actively engage with it.
Okay, so what does that look like?
So, after you watch that movie or listen to that podcast, take some time to think about what you learned.
Okay.
Maybe write down new words or phrases, or even try to summarize what you learned, but in English.
That's a good idea.
And if you're feeling adventurous, you could join an online conversation group.
Oh, yeah.
Or find a language exchange partner.
Yeah, those are great ideas.
Yeah, it's a chance to put your skills into practice and connect with other learners.
It's like you're opening up a whole new world
You are.
of language learning.
And remember, there's no one right way to do it.
Yeah.
It's all about finding what works for you and having fun.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what is one final thought you want to leave with our listener?
Remember that fluency is not a destination, it's a journey.
I love that. It's about enjoying the process, all the ups and downs.
Celebrating every step you take along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And remember, you're not alone
You're not.
on this journey.
There are so many people learning English,
Yeah.
and we can all support and encourage each other.
It's such a beautiful thought.
Thank you.
It's like language learning is not just about individual growth.
Yeah.
It's about connection
It is.
and building bridges
Exactly.
across cultures.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one inspiring others
I love that.
on their own English learning adventures.
That's a great goal.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about creating that immersive English-speaking environment,
Yeah.
even if you're not living in an English-speaking country. But I want to go a little deeper here.
Okay.
We've talked about watching movies, listening to podcasts, reading books.
Yeah.
But what about creating something yourself?
Oh,
Like expressing your own unique voice in English.
that's a fantastic idea. You're taking ownership of the language and making it your own.
Exactly. So maybe you write a short story, compose a song,
Yeah.
start a blog in English.
It's about pushing yourself
Yeah.
and using English to be creative.
And you might discover a whole new level of fluency and confidence that you didn't even know you had.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thought to end on.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good reminder that language learning is not just about acquiring knowledge, but it's about unlocking your potential
Yes.
and sharing your unique gifts
Totally.
with the world.
To our listener, we encourage you to embrace this journey of fluency with passion, curiosity, and a willingness to explore.
The world is waiting to hear your voice.
That's perfect. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you in the next one.